Dear brothers and sisters, good morning and welcome to St. Sarkis Church. Before I start my sermon, I owe everyone a big apology. If you look at your bulletins today, the second reading, it says the second epistle of St. Paul to the Hebrews. That's a mistake. There's only one letter to the Hebrews. I'm sure all of you noticed that and you're angry with me, so I owe an apology for you in advance. I'm happy that you are here today. Today we read a very important gospel message that comes to us from Luke. Jesus says to his disciples the following words: "Things that cause people to sin are bound to come, but woe to that person through whom they come. It would be better for him to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around his neck than for him to cause one of these little ones to sin. So watch yourselves." When we read these words and we think about, people who cause others to fall into sin, we have this idea about serial killers. We have this idea of people who look like Hitler, vicious, evil people. Sometimes we might think about, this priest or minister who abuses children. We never fathom that people in our lives could be the ones who are causing us to commit sins. Some of you know that besides being a priest, I'm also a licensed mental health counselor, and I see a few patients here and there. I see people who come to me because of addictions, because of anxieties, because of marriage problems, etc., etc. And when they spend enough time in therapy, we come to discover that those people who suffer with any of those three things that I mentioned, marriage problems, anxieties, addictions, they come with very deep wounds in their hearts. They come from families that were dysfunctional. Probably dad in that family was an alcoholic. Maybe he was a workaholic. Maybe he was not available emotionally. Mom probably was not available emotionally. She was not there to give adequate care to her children. Maybe she was an alcoholic, or maybe she was a perfectionist. And the children were given the role of the adults. And that is such a big pain for the children to carry. As they grow, they try to discover themselves. They try to know who they are and what is that dark cloud that is hanging upon their heads that they cannot get rid of. And then they discover the sad reality that the pain that they're dealing with comes to them because of the dysfunction of one or more family members. And that's why Jesus says it will be better for him, to that person who causes us to sin, to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around their neck. Jesus doesn't say, I will throw them into the sea. Jesus is understanding the pain that is caused to us by the abuse that we take, sometimes by our family members. But that's not what Jesus said. He doesn't say, throw them into the sea. What he says, if we continue reading, he says very clearly, if your brother sins, forgive him. Basically, Jesus is saying that, the first step for our recovery is forgiveness. Now, what is forgiveness? When we think about forgiveness, we often think that, if I'm forgiving this person who has abused me, I would go and I would embrace them. I would thank them very much for the abuse that they have given me. That is not forgiveness. That is enabling. Forgiveness is this: when you give up the idea of revenging the person who has caused any pain to you. When you say in your mind, in your soul, you hurt me, but I'm not going to hurt you. That is forgiveness. The following step after that is reconciliation. And not everyone is ready for reconciliation. Forgiveness. Sometimes when we choose not to forgive, we create a cage for ourselves and we live in that cage. We imprison ourselves in that cell. And that is very bad. A silly example. This guy who works with a friend of his or a co-worker of his goes to work every day, and during lunchtime, when they take their break, they take out whatever they have brought with them. And this guy opens his lunchbox. There's a sandwich. He opens that sandwich and he goes like, cheese sandwich. I hate cheese sandwich. So his friend the first day doesn't say anything. The following day, the guy comes with the same attitude. He opens the sandwich and he goes like, cheese sandwich. I hate cheese sandwich. So the guy says, well, maybe you should tell your mom or your spouse not to make cheese sandwiches for you. The guy says, I'm not married and I don't live with my mom. His friend says, then who's making your sandwiches? Well, I'm making my sandwiches. So then stop making those sandwiches. Sometimes it's easy to say than to apply. And I understand that. You know, when you're in a state where you cannot forgive, it's like you're playing this sad movie over and over and over again. And every time you play that movie, you become sad naturally. So maybe we need to stop playing that movie. But how? How? When the disciples heard what Jesus said, they were like, we can't do this. They didn't say this, obviously, but they said, increase our faith. They said, increase our faith because it is impossible for us to forgive someone. And Jesus told them, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you should be good. And I'm sure some of you have culinary expertise. You know how small the mustard seed is. But the mustard seed has the potential to grow. I believe that the mustard seed, which is the grace of faith, is given to us. Is given to each and every one of us. But the question is, what do we do with that mustard seed? I know a lot of people take that seed and they put it in the freezer. They freeze it. They put it in the cabinet. You know? Here's how you put your mustard seed, the seed of faith, in the freezer or the cabinet. When you say that, my faith is something private. It's between me and God. And I practice my faith when I go to church on Sundays. That's not an accurate expression of our faith. Our faith is practiced between Sundays. Is when we are able to ask God to give us His grace and to walk with Him and to give us the ability to forgive. And in that process, my friends, there is no instant gratification. You know, a lot of people who are struggling with forgiveness, they forgive and they expect instant gratification. They expect the other person whom they have forgiven in their hearts to come and embrace them and thank them for, being such a good person, such a good Christian. But it doesn't work that way. I know we live in a culture where instant gratification is pretty important, right? You post something on Facebook and then you expect people to like you. If they comment, they love you, right? But that's not how our faith operates. And that's why Jesus says, if you are a servant and working in the field of the Lord, do you think when you come home the Lord will tell you that, oh, you're doing great, now you go and rest? No, there's more work to be done. You need to serve dinner now. What Jesus is saying is that when we forgive, we shouldn't expect to take credit for it because God is constantly forgiving us. And we are in that same relationship with God. We forgive people and we expect to receive forgiveness from God. That's why He says, have this mentality. We are unworthy servants. We are unworthy because when we forgive people, God will not reward us for that. It will be like we are becoming more like God. We are starting a friendship with God. And that friendship is the most important thing. This past September, I had a short visit to Armenia. And I had no idea that I was going to meet some of my friends there. And when I say friends, we're talking about Vartabets and bishops. And one of them happened to be my dean from the seminary, with whom I had a very close relationship. He was a mentor to me. And we haven't met for a long time. And we had the opportunity to spend at least 2 sessions together talking about different things. And when we parted ways, I was like, now I understand where my thinking style is coming from. I have been influenced by this guy so much. The same thing should happen in our relationship with Jesus. Jesus is calling us to have a relationship of friendship. And when we become friends with Jesus, there's a process of change. And we start thinking like Jesus, acting like Jesus, and forgiving like Jesus. This is almost the end of the year. But today is a good opportunity for us to look inside and to see how we as children have been abused, have been hurt. Who are the people who have hurt us? Let's try to forgive them. Let's start a new chapter in our lives. If we need help, let's ask the professionals. The important thing is to change. And change is possible, my friends. May God bless you all now and always and forever. Amen.